Katie, I don't hear your voice. Is it just me?
Nope, it is not just you.
There we go.
Let me take two. Happy Thursday. Welcome to So What, the Marketing Analytics and Insights Live Show. I'm Katie, joined by Chris and John. Howdy, fellas.
Hello.
Hello. It's always good because first I'm like, what didn't I turn on? I'm like,
It's like crap. Did something get unplugged?
In case somebody was worried that we were avatars, we are not.
Yes,
we are
we're
humans who are flawed.
clearly not
This
AI.
week, we are talking about how to set up your own Claude Marketplace. So Chris and I have been talking a lot this week about skill and plugin governance, which is really just a fancy way of saying, how are you keeping track of the things you're creating and how are you disseminating or sharing them with your team members? So really great example. We have a skill in Claude that can build a PowerPoint deck. If I decide to make changes to that, then it only reflects on my Claude instance, not on Chris's, since we're on different Claude accounts, even though we're in the same company. So I then have to download the skill, put it someplace Chris can get it, either in Slack or in Drive. And then Chris has to download that skill that I then imported for him, bring it into his system, then check it, then close the loop and let me know that it was all set. That is a really broken process. But that's the process that we have and we acknowledge. And it's the process that a lot of companies have for maintaining skills and their plugins, regardless of what large language model system they have. It's very human dependent. And in our process, it's dependent on me remembering that I made updates and sharing it with other people. That's failure point number one. So there's a lot of things that can go wrong when you're talking about this kind of governance. So Chris, where would you like to get started today?
We should probably explain what a Claude Marketplace is.
Probably a good place to start. Chris, what's the Claude Marketplace?
A Claude Marketplace is a central repository where your plugins and skills live. That is centrally managed so that when you and your development teams and whatnot have an update of some kind, you say, let's update the marketplace. And then every Claude client within your organization that is subscribed to it gets an update. It's just like a Windows update or a Mac OS update or a Microsoft Office update. Hey, new updates available, and it updates things. And if you've ever used things like Claude Code in the terminal version, you'll see from time to time it's like, hey, 8 new plugins have been updated. Restart Claude to use the new plugins and stuff. And you'll see that in Claude Cowork too.
But that, so let's say for a company like ours, like I don't use Claude Code the way that you do. So I wouldn't necessarily get that update. So that's not a way that you'd be able to necessarily push it to me in my instance. Like we'd have to have some sort of connection.
We can, if you set up the central server, which is the marketplace.
All right.
And that's what it is. It's an unnecessarily fancy term for update server.
Amazing. John, there's going to be a pop quiz at the end.
Right. So is that part of your account or do you have to buy that additionally? Or how does that centralized piece work?
You have to build it yourself.
Even better.
Exactly.
All right. Well, so this show is going swimmingly. Let's get started.
All right. So the architecture to do this is a repository, a version control system called Git, G-I-T. And the most popular service that provides this, that's well known by most folks, is a company called GitHub. If you have a GitHub account, you can build what are called repositories, which are really just folders of stuff. And what makes it different and better is that it, of course, has the Git version control system in it. So you can make updates. People have to check things out or check things in. You can subscribe to a repository and get read-only updates. So, which is what like a Claude Cowork would do. You subscribe it to a GitHub repo, and it would synchronize with it every time it starts up. It goes to the GitHub server and says, hey, anything new? And it's like, no, okay, carry on. Or, hey, I see new things. I'm going to bring them down. What makes this nice? Now, for Trust Insights, this might be overkill since we only have 2 accounts for Claude. However, once you start getting to 3, 5, 10, 100, 1,000. This becomes really important. And as the number of accounts grow that need a subscription like this, the complexity grows too, because GitHub is free at the personal level. And so what we'll do today is a toy example, a minimal example using all free stuff. At an organization where you have things like governance and controls and IT stuff, you'll actually have to upgrade to John's point, to a paid GitHub account that allows you to integrate with your single sign-on, so that if an employee leaves, they don't take all your IP with them.
That would be a good thing. It sounds, to borrow a phrase from myself, new technology, old problems. It's version control software. When I was working with software developers, I didn't necessarily know all the systems they were using, but I understood the notion of checking your code in and out, especially when you're collaborating with other developers. So if, Chris checks out, the Trust Insights website code, adds a couple of lines, but John is also working on the Trust Insights code and checks it out, when they bring it back, when they both check it back in as they're supposed to at the end of the day with their notes of what's changed, because they're following SDLC best practices, both of them are going to get a notification that the code has changed. And so it's, do you want to merge it? Do you want to accept the changes? So like, that's one version of it. A similar but less technical version is like a content management system, where you would check out, parts of the content, make updates to it, check it back in. And then maybe your editor would be like, hey, there's new changes for you to review. It's very similar to that. It's sort of just a notification of like, something's different and you need to know about it. You can set up those kinds of notifications with your Google Drive. Like, hey, there's a new document in your Google Drive. Do you want to go check it out? Or, hey, this document you've been working on, John just eviscerated it and totally edited it. Do you want to see what's changed? Really, that's all it is. So at a very basic level, that's what we're talking about. To your point, Chris, Claude likes to make it fancy, so it's a marketplace.
Yes, it's marketplace. And you've run into this. So if you've ever been in your CMS, you'll see like, hey, this page is locked. Katie is currently working on this page. Do you want to override the lock if you have permissions to do so? Or otherwise, you just sit there and say, Katie, can you get out of the Academy page, please? I'm trying to edit it.
Yeah, and that happens. That happens a lot. But it's nice that you can't just override it, that there are those controls in place. And I can see where that's important when you're managing skills and plugins.
Exactly. And where this really gets important is for larger companies and enterprises, where let's say you've got a skill like the Trust Insights, PowerPoint slide deck skill that has our brand guidelines and standards and logos and stuff. You want a version control system like a Claude Marketplace in place, so that if we rebrand, you don't have 1,000 laptops out there all with the old style guide embedded on it, and then you have to go desk by desk and say, all right, now you got to uninstall the plugin, install the new one and stuff, and here's the new template and stuff. You say, let's update the server and push all of the Claude clients to now you automatically use the new brand standards,
which is fantastic, because that is such a headache for the person who is responsible for making sure everybody's using the correct brand standards.
Now, the other use case, and this is something we're not going to do today because I'm still debugging it myself. The other use case is that the Git framework it's free open source software. You do not have to use GitHub. You can use anything that supports that, including just a plain old Linux server. One of the things that I'm exploring right now is what it would look like for, say, Trust Insights to have a subscription-based server where you would subscribe to the Trust Insights plugin service, and then we would make updates into things like plugins like our deep research suite, which you can find at academy.trustinsights.ai, or our free fact check skill, which you can find at academy.trustinsights.ai, or any of these things, so that as we develop new skills and plugins, A, you don't have to pay $20 every time we update something, but B, as I make changes to things, it propagates to anyone who's got an active subscription. And if you're using the enterprise controls, which not only have version control, but have things like single sign-on, the moment you stop paying, it goes away.
Also helpful.
Yes. But that's for another time.
Yes.
So today, let's go ahead and get started in actually setting this thing up. So you'll need two things. First, you need a GitHub account, and you should probably have an AI tool like Claude. And by the way, all of the major tools, so ChatGPT Work, Google Anti-Gravity, Microsoft GitHub Copilot, can all integrate with GitHub repos for their skills. They do it all in slightly different ways. So today is focused on Claude, but if you build a good GitHub repository that follows standards, then when you have, changes, or when your company changes providers, whatever, you don't have to throw it all away. You'll be able to adapt it. So this is the Trust Insights GitHub account. It's we have a bunch of free stuff on there as well that nobody knows to go look for. I'm going to start a brand new repository. And anytime you're starting a repository, you have to do a whole bunch of things like naming it. So I'm going to call this Claude Skills. And this is for our Claude Skills. If you're doing this for your company, please, please, please keep it private. You do not want your public stuff. Do you want to add a README? That is up to you. README documentation is not a bad idea for this, because what you kind of want to do is say, maybe there's for employees who go to that page, they can see instructions like, here's how you connect this to your Claude, etc. The git ignore is going to depend on what kind, if there's any code involved in your skills. If you don't know, leave this as it is. And license, no license, because this is your private company repository. If you're doing this publicly, you could choose your licenses. Like if you were a open source software developer, you might have a public repository of all your plugins and skills that you're just giving away, in which case you would choose the appropriate settings here. We're going to create the repository. And now what you end up with is an empty repository. This is going to be our marketplace. I probably should have named it something clever, but I didn't.
No, it is what it is.
It is. That's unfortunate. So once you've got the repository set up, you'll now go into, and you can do this in anything that can connect to the repository and to wherever it is you have your plugins. I'm going to use the Claude code that's in my terminal, but you can use the desktop app. I think you can use Claude Cowork as long as you've got a folder with all of your plugins and skills in it. And we're going to say today we're going to set up a Claude Marketplace. I've got some documentation that I'll provide to you for instructions on how to do this. This is going to be a very minimal private repository using a personal GitHub account. So it won't have things like access control and single sign-on. This is just a toy example. So we'll be starting there. I'll tell it where the documentation is. Documentation is in my output folder, and this is called Clean Master Report.md. I did some deep research using the Trust Insights Deep Research Suite, which is at academy.trustinsights.ai.
I should have had that handy.
Because I know how to set up a basic GitHub repo, but I wanted to know if there were specific weird things that I needed to do for this. And it turns out it's actually really, really simple. And we're going to say the skills and plugins we're going to use are in the Claude folder. The skills and plugins are in this projects.claude folder. As we always do, ask me up to 20 clarifying questions so you have enough information to succeed at the task using your superpowers brainstorming skill if needed. Now, with that, we're going to get Claude underway to say, okay, it's probably going to ask things like, where's the repo? Right? I'm going to proactively just tell it that this is the repo we'll work with. So while it's doing this, you should think about, because anytime you're working with GitHub, you have to have a local copy on your computer that it can push and pull information from and keep things in sync. So somebody in your organization has to be the maintainer. Somebody has to be in charge. And so before you embark on setting up a Claude Marketplace, you should probably sit through
the 5P framework by Trust Insights, which is purpose, people, process, platform, and performance. Purpose, what the heck are you doing and why? People, who's involved, who owns this thing, because someone's got to own it, but who are the end users? Process, how are you setting up? How is it being maintained? How is it being secured? Platform, what are you using? In this case, we're using GitHub and pushing into Claude. And then performance, did you accomplish the thing that you meant to do?
Right. And so if you're not clear on that, you might have to, you should think that through. So let's see what it says. What do we want to do? What do you want to push into this? I want to push in my deep research suite plus all my standalone skills. Do I want it in a few theme plugin, or one skill equals one plugin, one big toolkit plugin? I'm going to do the themed plugins here. What's the source of truth? Is it your computer or is it GitHub? If you're setting this up for your company, the source of truth should be your repo. And what's the governance level? This is where you start getting into questions like, do you want CI, which stands for continuous integration, aka GitHub itself can run checks to see, like, did you upload garbage? Did you upload malware? Did you do something? If you were going to do this for your organization, then I would say you'd want CI, continuous. It's called CI, continuous integration, and CD, continuous deployment. And basically, it's constantly running a script saying, is what's in the repository correct, factually correct? Does it contain any junk code or things? For today's toy example, we're bypassing that. Please do not bypass that. Please instead actually use that feature. It's there. It's free. Let's see. The target. Is this the correct target? Yes, that is correct. The license and author. No license field because this is a toy example. Do you want a one-time export or a synchronized script to keep it in sync? I'm going to do a one-time export because this is a toy example. And do you want to exclude anything? No, this is fine. It's not like we have anything, inappropriate in this particular project.
Okay. I think I'm kind of with you so far, but I'm going to have to watch the replay to make sure I'm really consuming everything. This is a little above my understanding of how Claude and code and GitHub works. But, I think that for someone like me, I'd be like, oh, let me start with the README, because that's probably going to tell me the most of what I need to know, which is interesting because for a lot of the work that I'm doing in co-work, Claude is automatically creating a README file. And I'm like, oh, that's really interesting. It's something that I think people should get used to, because it's going to answer a lot of the questions that you have about the stuff that you're looking at.
Mm-hmm. And the good news is Claude itself, if you've given it good documentation, which I made in advance, then you can at any point say, what the heck are we doing? Stop and explain this to me. And it will totally do that. The documentation itself is, how long is this documentation? This is 29,000 words. It's a book. I did build a book for this on how to do all of this stuff last night because I wanted to make sure that actually works. It says, I've got the plan. Here's the plan. Do you like the plan? Here's what going to be in the README. Does this look good? Looks good. And now, based on, so you'll, it's going to do the implementation plan. It's going to say, here's the layout. The README, which says, here's what everything does. Let me make this full screen. The deep research suite, which is going to copy from our thing. It's got 4 categories of plugins it's going to make. So your document tools, like your PowerPoint and your PDF tools, your research tools like fact check and deep research prompt, your writing tools like your QA text, your peer review, and your strategy tools, the job to AI and ask the ICP. And so it's creating essentially a layout for this. Let's go ahead and say, proceed with implementation. So it decided to essentially make plugins out of all the individual skills. Now, it asked if you wanted to do this, you wanted to leave them standalone. I chose to say, go ahead and make some cool plugins, but you don't have to. You can certainly just say, no, leave it exactly the way that I made it, because that's the way I want it.
Okay.
So after all of this is done, And you would go into a system like your Claude desktop. And inside Claude desktop, let me pull up my settings here. Under things like plugins, you'll notice there is a button here called Add a Marketplace. And if we've done our job right, see there's a setting here called Add from a repository. It will say, please make sure that you trust the repository. Like, don't connect this to randos on the internet, please. But if let me see how the actual thing is doing here. It's still working. I would take just this URL from our repository and say, here is the Claude Marketplace. And do you want to keep it your plugins up to date? Yes, I do. If I build this, if I finish the repository, if Claude finishes the repository, then I, as the maintainer, would update the plugins as I make changes to them. Or Katie, if she makes a new plugin, would contact me as the repo maintainer and say, hey, can you put this in the repo or can you update this in the repo? I would make those changes, push it to GitHub, and then all 10,000 of our employees, if we were at a big enterprise, would suddenly get, boom, there's the newest version of Katie's, Ask the ICP.
So I don't have, okay, I was trying to follow along in my Claude. So if I go to Claude plugins on my desktop app and add the marketplace, I don't have to get the latest stuff through Claude Code. Like the marketplace you've already built is going to push all of the changes to me. Am I going to get some sort of notification, or does it silently update in the background?
I believe in desktop, it just does it every time it starts up.
Okay.
So every time you restart the Claude app.
Got it. Which is helpful. And I'm guessing the answer is yes, but is there an instance where you would want to loudly notify people that things have changed?
I mean, there's plenty, especially if you're doing things that are not like bug fixes. So if I'm doing a bug fix, whatever, that's just sort of my job. If design says, hey, we got a brand new style guide for the company, you can't send a notification inside Claude. So you would have to send out an email to all staff saying, hey, your Claude's going to update. This is the new thing. If it produces a deck that looks like this now, that's not an accident. Nothing's wrong with your Claude. This is the new brand style guide. If your Claude produces a deck that looks like this, that's the old style guide, and you need to restart your Claude.
So doing this doesn't bypass the human part of this, which is the communication. So when I was doing software development, every time we did a release, we would have what's called release notes, and they would be sent around to the entire organization. Even though they were not the end users, they would have to answer questions to our customers of what's changed, what's different, big, small. Why do you care about this thing? So it's just a good practice to get into, and maybe sort of new tech does not solve old problems. The bug fixes, as Chris mentioned, like those things can happen silently, but when there's major changes, it's good to get into a consistent schedule so that people start to know when to expect things versus I changed this thing. Okay, I changed this thing. Okay, now I changed this thing. And it's hard to keep track of it. So let's say if you find things changing weekly, then try to get into a schedule of, okay, every Friday afternoon, we're going to commit the changes. And while we're doing that, we're sending out a company-wide email. People start to expect those things, then they look for them. And that's going to take a lot of the guesswork out of, wait, there's something new. What do you mean there's something new? Nobody told me there was something new. So whatever that communication channel looks like, maybe it's like a Slack message or your company's intranet or your email system, whatever it is, here's what's changed. Here's why you should care. And just get on a consistent schedule of that communication. That's going to save you a lot of headache.
And that is very much a part of AI enablement itself, right? It is, you almost want that weekly email to be something that people maybe even look forward to. Like, ooh, what kind of goodies am I getting this week?
Yeah. Maybe it's an opportunity for people to say, hey, I thought I was going to get this thing. John was looking for his, do sales for me skill. When's that coming? What do you mean it's
Grab
not in
that
there?
bag skill. Grab the bag skill.
I was like, I can't think of a clever name, but where's my John Wall skill? But what we're talking about, if we're being honest, we're talking about software development. That's what this is. And so there's, again, new tech, old problems, all that sort of stuff. Follow the SDLC best practices, and you will be able to do things like this without really stumbling too much. Make sure you outline your 5 Ps, but you're talking about things like release notes. You're now going to have a backlog of requests. How do those get managed? So this is sort of like the dark side of doing this stuff. As these things become available, you start to get into true software development. You start to get into feature requests. You start to get into, well, this is only going to work for me this way. So now I need the custom version of this. So just sort of as you're building this, just be prepared for that sort of, trickle effect to happen.
Yeah, we actually have some questions. So Christopher says, I've been hoping for a marketplace standardization. So sand skills can be used with multiple platforms. You can. However, it's different from platform to platform. So for example, if you want to do this with ChatGPT work, you can, but you have to, so with ChatGPT work, you have to package it up, I believe, as an archive, and then OpenAI has an API for this. You set a bridge between your Git repo to the OpenAI skills API that then people on your team have the ability to access. It's a pain in the butt, but you can run it from the same GitHub repo internally.
Okay.
And Sandra asking, if it's a private repo, how do people in your company get in your company or your clients access? So at the top of the episode, one thing, as I said, was today is a toy example. We're using a personal GitHub account that you should, under no circumstances should you ever do this, what we're showing today, in an enterprise. You would need a paid GitHub account that integrates with your single sign-on. And then in the URL, instead of a naked GitHub URL like we've been using for the demo here, you would actually get one that has a token that when someone connects their Claude to it, it negotiates with single sign-on. And if that account is not in the approved list from your single sign-on system, GitHub itself will bounce it, say, nope, this is not an authorized user from your instance. And that's also what prevents it from being shared outside your organization. The moment you go to authenticate with GitHub itself, it calls your single sign-on and says, is this an authorized user? But you have to be on a paid plan. And you have to do all your seat management and stuff in there. And you have to pay like $25 a month per seat.
So it's almost like doing the 5 Ps to plan it out ahead. And I say that mostly not facetiously. Like, there's a reason that we really encourage people to do their requirements ahead of time to really understand the pitfalls of doing something like this. Because, Chris, to your point, it's a lot more complicated than we're able to show in a short demo. There's, especially when you get into those enterprise size organizations, not just enterprise size, but also enterprise AI, which is a different thing. So you have the enterprise organization, which is size based on revenue and headcount, and then enterprise organizations, which are held to stricter standards of how and when they can use AI.
Yeah. I mean, even a tiny little doctor's office with like 10 people in it has to adhere to essentially enterprise requirements, right? Because it's HIPAA, it's healthcare information, protected health information. You may have 10 people on staff. You must play by the same rules as like, a massive hospital institution.
It's interesting, and this is perhaps a conversation for another time, but I've noticed a lot of doctors' offices are now using AI transcription services, which small practices, large practices, I don't know how much governance there is around those specific services. So that may be a conversation for another time. But with this GitHub repo, with this Claude Marketplace, and I recall, Chris, I believe you said at the top of the episode, this is not a Claude specific thing. Like, you can do this for Gemini. You can do this for OpenAI. You can do this for other large language model providers. We just happen to be showing it on Claude.
Exactly. And that goes with the whole thing about you're using the skills API with OpenAI's whatever thing that they've got, which is always a headache.
So Sandra has a follow-up question. That adds up quickly if it's a big company. It does. Would it be easier to save skills or brand files somewhere in the company's OneDrive or Google Drive? That's what we do. That's what we advise a lot of our clients to do. It's a good starting place to pilot, are people even using these things? So Chris has created a lot of skills that I probably haven't installed. And so, he and I are out of sync in that respect. And so that's a place for us to start of, am I, aware that there's things in there that I need that would be helpful? Am I replicating? So I would start definitely with OneDrive or Google Drive, just to get people used to the idea that there are things available to them.
Yeah. The downside is that approach, like I said, just doesn't have the version control. So if I download and install a skill or a plugin, the obligation is on me, the user, when that email comes out on Fridays to say, yeah, you need to go and update your plugins now.
Mm-hmm.
But if you have the full marketplace, does it actually automate that? Does it check in when you first fire up?
It does.
Okay, so that you'd close the loop on diffs there.
That's right. Other questions?
I mean, you went through the setup, I understand the concept of it. You went through the setup pretty quickly. So can we go back to that for a minute?
Yeah, sure. All right. So to recap, the first thing you got to do is you have to decide what plugins and skills you want to have, right? So if I am in something like my Claude, do you want to load all of these? Right. The answer is maybe yes, maybe no. So you have to think that through first. Once you've thought through what plugins and things do you want, the next thing to do is Claude has a plugins skill, funny enough, that allows you to gives the background information it needs to learn how to structure a plugin for a marketplace. But what I did was I did some deep research to figure out how to set up marketplaces in GitHub, and that research is stuff that I put into a document that I could then go read, which I read last night, so that I knew what the heck I was doing today. That also contains all the rules. I then went to Claude Code. I've used Claude Code. You can use Cowork. You can use anything that has access to wherever you put those plugins and skills. And I said, I want you to help me set up this thing. And then I went to GitHub, start a new repo that has the appropriate privileges and stuff. We walked through setting up with the bare bones GitHub repo, set to private, given a name that probably should have been more clever, and connect the repo to Claude Code by just giving it the URL and saying, hey, I've got access to it. I glossed over that you have to have your Claude Code be able to talk to GitHub. That can be a connector if you're using the desktop version of Claude Code, or in my case, it's a command line tool because I have a full developer environment. One of the gotchas with this is if you're doing it on GitHub, you probably should at least have the ear of someone who has some experience with GitHub repos, just so that when something goes wrong, and it will, you can say, hey, Chris, why is it doing this? Like, I gave it permissions. Why is it not working? You then give Claude the instruction. Here's the plugins that we want to do. Here is the repo where it's going to live. Here's the privacy level. Arrange the marketplace, build it, and then push it to GitHub, where it will then live. That configures the Claude Marketplace. And then finally, you take the Claude Marketplace URL and you give it to your individual Claude clients to say, now go subscribe to this marketplace. And again, kind of going back to what Sandra was saying, it might be like for Trust Insights. Yeah, here's the URL, right? No, there's two Claude accounts. But at a large organization, it might be, okay, we need the paid version that has single sign-on integration, that has this, that. And at a larger enterprise company, there's a very good chance you already have that. Like I have yet to run into an enterprise size company that does not have some developers with GitHub accounts already, and that already has repos internally. So you can say to them, hey, can you spin up another repo for us?
Yeah, that makes sense. Now, again, you keep talking about Claude Marketplace, but what is the Gemini or OpenAI version? You would want to use their coding system?
You can. You don't have to. You have to have their standards. So
Well, I guess what I'm asking is, so you're talking about setting up a Claude Marketplace, and not everyone's using Claude. Some people are Gemini shops, some people are OpenAI shops. So they could use that version to make their own like Gemini marketplace.
no, so the marketplace lingo is unique to Claude. This regular GitHub repo, you can give that directly to like anti-gravity or Codex, whatever, and it will know what to do with it.
Got it. Okay, that's what I was trying to understand, because obviously we're focused on Claude today, but I know not everyone's a Claude user. So what about a Copilot user?
If you're using Microsoft GitHub Copilot, it actually works great with this because GitHub Copilot is actually a creation of GitHub itself.
Okay. That makes sense. I mean, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think through, like, not everyone's using Claude. I understand we're demonstrating on Claude, but anyone using a large language model with more than a couple of people is going to run into version control issues.
Exactly. And that's really why we're doing this, because, you know, to Sandra's point earlier, you can just put stuff on a shared drive, but you don't have version control. You have no auto update capability other than, hey, update it. This provides the automation mechanism of, we're going to update it for you.
John, do you prefer things automatically updating for you, or do you want to have the control over updating so that you know what's being updated?
Yeah, I'm always a fan of, updates, and just send me a lot of notifications. Like I want to know if conflicts, I want to know if anything's gone wrong. But yeah, you kind of reach a certain point where you've got so much stuff that you don't want to have to manage it. But that leads into the question I had really, though, is, okay, so you've got this set up, great, but it's like, you can't just have an open directory. Like, you said, we talked about how somebody's got to be responsible for it. What are some of the best practices that person can do? Are they, do they have a suggested file structure, and can they even do more as far as like, how are you just going to organize this instead of it just being a pile of files?
There is there's a required file structure for the marketplaces. When you're using it with Claude. Now, the other systems, to Katie's question earlier, the other systems can work with it, but Claude in particular is very specific about exactly how it has to be set up. And you do need someone who's going to be the librarian, the custodian of it, right? There has to be a caretaker. Now, it's not a full-time job. It's 5 minutes a week probably for shops that don't do a lot of their own skills. If you are a shop that does a lot of your own skills, it could be a greater time commitment.
But there does have to be a named owner, and you have to be clear about what that person does. That's one of the ways that, we talk about, like, the AI champions and the culture carriers. Like, those are great places to start in terms of who's going to own it. They have to obviously have those GitHub skills, but it's a job that has to be done, and someone has to take that responsibility and ownership for it.
And that also means, huge surprise, you need to have a process for how updates happen. Who's allowed to request them? How do if you have a system like Jira or Asana or something, how can somebody say, hey, I made a new skill?
I mean, again, it's software development. So if you understand the SDLC, which is software development lifecycle, this should all feel very reminiscent. You have a backlog, you have your, sprints, you have your releases, you have your communication. It's all the same. It's just a different piece of technology now.
Yep. So it looks like Claude has actually finished up in our repository now, which was a blank screen. We now have different folders here. We have a nice little README. It says, this is the Trust Insights Claude Skills Marketplace. You can add it to your Claude code session. Or if I go back to our Claude client and I hit sync now, it will probably say, hey, you need to GitHub, you need to add this user to your Claude GitHub account. So I would have to go and do that, install Claude into there. I'm not going to do that because that requires a whole bunch of passwords and things. But because this is a private repo, I would basically need to add, in this case, this is our client services account, would need to be added to that repo so that it can use this. So again, that actually goes back to the question earlier of, well, how do we protect this from just randos? Well, you need to add your account in there. But once you're in there, let's go back here. Let's see. You now have access to all of these different skills, and if I make updates to them, it will auto update.
Amazing. Bing, bang, boom, dumb.
Yes,
Super
it only
easy.
took 42 minutes and a lot of hand waving behind the scenes.
But I mean, and that's the thing is, like, I hope that, through these live stream demos, we can at least show the essence of a thing, knowing that with the caveat, there's a lot of setup that actually goes into it. But here's what's possible if you are invested in doing it.
Mm-hmm. Any final thoughts? Dad jokes, barbecue recipes.
We actually just made a peach habanero barbecue sauce, which is very good. But that's besides the point. No, what I would say for people is start with a basic documentation system. And so we talked about this in the newsletter this week, which you can get at trustinsights.ai/newsletter. And, start with a simple spreadsheet of what you've created. Just start that logging. Maybe that lives in Google Drive. Maybe that lives on SharePoint or OneDrive. And give people the transparency. If you start getting those more requests of, I need it updated, I need this different thing, then you may be starting to look into a different kind of version control system. But start with the basics. I don't think you need to immediately invest in building new software or buying something off the shelf. Look at the tools that you have. For a lot of people, those are going to be good enough.
Exactly.
Yeah,
right,
have a process.
Yeah. Have a process of some kind.
Yeah.
All right, that's going to do it for this week's show. I believe next week we are off because we will be at Event Nexus, and we'll be back the following week talking about some AI writing stuff. So we'll stay tuned for that. Thanks for tuning in, folks, and we'll see you on the next one. Thanks for watching today. Be sure to subscribe to our show wherever you're watching it. For more resources and to learn more, check out the Trust Insights podcast at trustinsights.ai/TI podcast and a weekly email newsletter at trustinsights.ai/newsletter. Got questions about what you saw in today's episode? Join our free Analytics for Marketers Slack group at trustinsights.ai/analytics for marketers. See you next time.